The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched out like a metal forest under the artificial stars. Lisa Parker walked through the main entrance and felt the weight of 47 different species watching her every step. The air hummed with alien voices speaking in languages that sounded like wind chimes, grinding stone, and whispered secrets. She had been coming to this place for 12 years now, but today felt different. Today felt final. The Zephyrians were already agitated, their crystal bodies flickering with nervous blue light. They hung in the air near their section of the hall, whispering to each other in their musical language. Lisa could see the worry in their movements. The massive Thurok delegates sat on their reinforced platforms, their thick gray skin glistening under the chamber lights. Even these giants seemed uncomfortable today. Something was wrong and everyone could feel it. Jake Morrison entered from the side door, his military uniform perfect as always. His face showed nothing, but Lisa knew him well enough to see the tension in his shoulders. Behind him came Elena Rodriguez, carrying a small data pad that contained information which would change everything. Elena looked tired, like she had not slept in days. She probably had not. The three humans took their places at the speaking platform in the center of the hall. Around them, the alien delegates grew quiet. The veiled Nari stopped their floating dance and hung still in their energy fields. The insect-like Kreks folded their wings and watched with compound eyes that reflected the light like mirrors. Even the plant-based Sylvan representatives ceased their slow swaying movements. The Archon Prime stood up from his raised seat. He was tall even for his species, with 4 arms that moved like flowing water and skin that changed color with his emotions. Right now, his skin showed deep purple, which meant he was worried. His voice filled the hall through the translation system that let every species understand each other. "We welcome the human delegation to this emergency assembly," the Archon Prime said. "Though we must note that recent human actions have caused concern throughout the Council, we hope today will bring clarity to these troubling developments." Lisa stepped forward. She had given many speeches in this hall over the years. She had argued for trade agreements, debated military actions, and negotiated peace treaties. But this speech would be different. This speech would be goodbye. "Honored delegates," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "Humanity comes before you today not to argue or debate, but to inform you of a decision we have made. A decision that did not come easily, but came from necessity." The hall grew even quieter. Lisa could hear the soft humming of the Zephyrians, the deep breathing of the Thurok, and the almost silent whispers of the veiled Nari. She looked around at faces that had become familiar over the years. Some of these beings she had called friends. Some had been allies in difficult times. All of them were about to learn something that would change how they saw everything. 3 months ago, our research vessel Columbus made a discovery on the Rim worlds, Lisa continued. Dr. Rodriguez led the archaeological team that uncovered ancient archives from a civilization that existed long before the Council was formed. What we found in those archives has forced us to reevaluate everything we thought we knew about our place in this galaxy. Elena stepped forward and activated her data pad. Holographic images appeared above the speaking platform, showing the crystal archives they had found and the information contained within them. The alien delegates leaned forward, trying to understand what they were seeing. "The records we discovered tell a story very different from the one we have all believed," Lisa said. "They speak of the true founding of the Galactic Council and its real purpose. They reveal that this organization was not created to foster cooperation between equal species, but to manage and control emerging civilizations." A ripple of sound went through the hall. The Zephyrians' blue light became brighter and more frantic. Several Thurok delegates stood up, their heavy footsteps echoing off the walls. The Archon Prime's skin shifted from purple to orange, which meant anger or fear. According to these records, Lisa continued, each species that joins the council is carefully guided into specific roles. The Zephyrians provide energy, the Thurok provide labor, the Valenari gather information. Each species serves a function, in a system designed to prevent any one race from becoming too powerful or too independent. The protests began then. Delegates from a dozen species started talking at once, their voices mixing into a confused roar. The Archon Prime raised all four arms for silence, but it took several minutes for the noise to die down. These are serious accusations, the Archon Prime said, his skin now showing deep red stripes. If humanity has evidence of wrongdoing, it should be presented through proper channels for investigation. Lisa nodded slowly. We considered that option, but the evidence goes much deeper than simple wrongdoing. The records show that humanity was brought into the council for a specific purpose. We were designated as what the archives call a catalyst species. Our natural adaptability and independence made us perfect subjects for testing new methods of control and management. She paused and looked around the hall. Every challenge we have faced, every conflict we have overcome, every victory we have achieved has been orchestrated. We were not partners in this alliance. We were test subjects in an ongoing experiment. The silence that followed was complete. Even the background hum of the chamber's systems seemed to fade away. Lisa could see the shock on alien faces, the disbelief in their body language. Some delegates were looking at each other with confusion. Others were staring at the Archon Prime with what might have been suspicion. The records contain detailed plans spanning centuries, Elena said, speaking for the first time. Plans that include specific scenarios designed to test human responses to various pressures. Military conflicts that were allowed to escalate to study our tactical thinking. Diplomatic crises that were created to observe our negotiation methods. Even our scientific breakthroughs were guided and monitored. The Archon Prime's skin was now cycling through multiple colors rapidly. Even if these allegations were true, which we do not accept, what does humanity propose to do about ancient history? The Council of today is not responsible for decisions made millennia ago. Lisa smiled sadly. That might be true if the manipulation had stopped with ancient history, but our investigation revealed that these programs are still active. Current council policies still reflect the management strategies outlined in those archives. Humanity is still being studied, still being tested, still being controlled. She looked directly at the Archon Prime. We came here today not to accuse or to seek justice. We came to inform you that humanity will no longer participate in this system. We are withdrawing from all council activities and returning to our own space. We will honor existing agreements until they expire naturally, but we will not renew them. The hall erupted again, but this time the voices carried a different tone. There was panic in the Zephyrian chiming, desperation in the Thurok rumbling, and fear in the Valenari whispers. Lisa let the noise continue for a few moments before raising her hand for quiet. We bear no ill will toward any species represented. Here, she said. Many of you may have been unaware of these programs. Some of you may even be subjects of similar management strategies. But humanity has decided that we would rather face the dangers of independence than accept the safety of manipulation. She picked up her datapad and prepared to leave. Our formal withdrawal documents will be filed within the standard time frame. All human personnel will be recalled from council operations over the coming months. We wish you all well in whatever future you choose to build. As the three humans walked toward the exit, the hall behind them dissolved into chaos. Delegates were shouting questions that would not be answered, making demands that would not be met, and pleading for reconsideration that would not come. Lisa Parker walked through it all with quiet dignity, leading her species out of the galactic community they had thought they were part of. The great doors of the council hall closed behind them with a soft hiss, and humanity began its journey home. 3 months earlier, the research ship Columbus drifted silently through the empty space near the edge of Council territory. The ship was small compared to the massive vessels that most species used for deep space exploration, but it was built for precision work rather than size. Elena Rodriguez stood in the archaeology lab, studying the readings from their latest scan of the dead world below them. The planet had no name in any current database. It showed up on star charts as simply Designation R7739, a rocky world that had once supported life but now held only ruins and silence. The energy signatures they were detecting suggested something much older than anything they had seen before. Much older and much more advanced. Captain Danny Walsh joined Elena at the viewing screen. He was a quiet man who had spent most of his career on exploration missions like this one. His job was to keep the ship safe while the scientists did their work. He looked at the swirling patterns of ancient energy that still pulsed through the dead cities below them. "How old do you think it is?" he asked Elena. Elena adjusted the scanner settings and watched the numbers change on her display. The radiation. Decay patterns suggest at least 5,000 years. Maybe more. This civilization was already gone when the council was first formed. The away team took a shuttle down to the largest ruin complex on the northern continent. Elena led the team, with her assistant Marcus Bell and 2 security officers. The ruins stretched for kilometers in every direction, made of a crystal material that still held traces of the energy that had once powered this civilization. They found the archive chamber on their 3rd day of exploration. It was buried deep, beneath what had once been the central government complex. The chamber was perfectly preserved, protected by energy fields that still functioned after thousands of years. Inside, crystalline storage units lined the walls from floor to ceiling. Marcus ran his scanner over the nearest storage unit. "The data is still intact," he said with excitement in his voice. "Whatever power source they used, it is still working." Elena connected their portable translation system to one of the storage units. The ancient civilization had been thorough in their record-keeping. They had documented everything about their society, their technology, and their interactions with other species. But it was the records about something called the Management Protocol that made Elena's blood run cold. The files described a system for controlling emerging civilizations across the galaxy. Young species would be watched and studied from a distance until they developed space travel. Then they would be contacted by what appeared to be a friendly alliance of older civilizations. This alliance would offer membership, technology, and protection in exchange for cooperation and service. But the cooperation was not voluntary. Each species was carefully guided into roles that served the alliance while preventing them from becoming truly independent. The files contained detailed psychological profiles of dozens of species and specific strategies for managing their development. Elena recognized many of the species' names from the current Galactic Council. She found the section about humans buried deep in the files. According to the records, humanity had been identified as a potential catalyst species decades before first. Contact was made. The files described humans as unusually adaptable and stubbornly independent, making them perfect test subjects for new control methods. Every major event in human history since joining the Council was listed in these files. The Outer Rim War had been orchestrated to test human military thinking. The trade disputes with the Zephyrians had been created to study human negotiation tactics. Even the discovery of new technologies had been carefully guided to see how humans would adapt and improve upon alien designs. Elena sat in the archive chamber reading file after file, watching her species' entire relationship with the galaxy rewrite itself before her eyes. Everything they had accomplished, every victory they had won, every friend they had made had been part of an elaborate experiment. They were not partners in galactic civilization. They were lab rats in a cosmic maze. She transmitted her findings back to Earth using the ship's quantum communication system. The message was marked with the highest security codes and sent directly to President Karen Walsh's private office. Elena knew that what she had found would change everything, but she did not know how humanity would respond to the truth. On Earth, President Walsh received the transmission while reviewing budget reports for the Colonial Expansion Program. She was a practical woman who had spent her career dealing with difficult problems, but nothing had prepared her for what she read in Elena's report. She called an emergency meeting of the Human Defense Council and had Elena's data projected. Onto the main conference screen, Admiral Chris Bennett was the first to speak after reviewing the files. His voice was tight with controlled anger. "They have been playing us from the beginning. Every battle we fought, every peace we negotiated, every technology we developed was part of their experiment." General Sarah Murphy studied the military, sections of the archive data. The tactical scenarios they created for us were designed to push us in specific directions. They wanted to see how we would respond to different types of pressure and conflict. Secretary of Science Paul Johnson looked sick as he read through the research protocols. They have been studying our psychology, our social structures, our decision-making processes. They know more about how humans think than we do ourselves. President Walsh remained calm as the others expressed their shock and anger. She had learned long ago that emotional reactions rarely led to good decisions. "What are our options?" she asked. Admiral Bennett's first suggestion was military action. "We could expose them publicly, rally the other species against the Council, leadership, start a rebellion." General Murphy shook her head. "The archive data shows that most of the other species are being managed just as carefully as we are. They might not believe us, or they might be too dependent on the system to risk changing it." Secretary Johnson suggested a diplomatic approach. "We could present the evidence to the Council and demand reforms. Use the truth as leverage to negotiate better terms for humanity." President Walsh considered each option carefully. Then she proposed something different. "What if we simply left?" she asked. "What if we quietly withdrew from all Council activities and returned to human space? No threats, no demands, no dramatic gestures, just a polite goodbye and a return to independence." The room fell silent as the implications of her suggestion sank in. Admiral Bennett was the first to understand. "They need us more than they realize. Our research, our military expertise, our technological innovations. If we simply disappeared, they would have to deal with the consequences." General Murphy nodded slowly. "It would be a test of their system. Can they function without the human element they have been using and studying for so long?" Secretary Johnson looked worried. "But what about our people who are working throughout Council space? Our scientists, our diplomats, our military personnel? Some of them have built entire careers within the Council system." President Walsh had already thought about this problem. "We will recall them all, but quietly and gradually. We will honor our existing agreements until they expire naturally. We will not abandon anyone, but we will not commit to anything new." The decision was made that day in a conference room on Earth, but it would take months to implement. Every human working in Council space would need to be contacted and informed. Every agreement and treaty would need to be reviewed. Every ongoing project would need to be wrapped up or transferred to other species. The withdrawal would be so gradual and polite that most species would not realize what was happening until it was too late to stop it. Humans would simply fulfill their current obligations and then go home. No explanations would be given until the very end, when Ambassador Lisa Parker would stand before the full Council and tell them why humanity was walking away. Elena Rodriguez completed her work in the archive chamber and returned to the Columbus with enough evidence to justify humanity's decision. The ancient civilization that had created the archive was long gone, but their warning about the management protocol would give humanity the chance to escape the same fate. The truth had set them free, but freedom would require them to leave everything they thought they had built with their galactic neighbors. The Columbus left the dead world behind and began its journey back to human space, carrying the knowledge that would change the course of human history. In the archive chamber they left behind, the crystal storage units continued their silent vigil, waiting for the next species to discover the truth about the price of galactic civilization. Commander Tony Hayes stood on the observation deck of Research Station Omega, watching the stars through the massive viewing window. The station hung in orbit around a gas giant in the Valnari system, home to one of the Council's most advanced scientific facilities. Tony had been the station commander for 3 years, overseeing joint research projects between humans and 6 other species. Today would be his last day. The message from Earth had arrived 2 weeks ago through secure channels. It contained his new orders and the reasons behind them. Tony had read the archaeological report from the Columbus 3 times before he fully understood what it meant. Everything he had worked for, every breakthrough his team had achieved, every friendship he had built with alien colleagues had been part of an elaborate manipulation. Dr. Amy Foster found him in the observation lounge later that morning. She was the lead researcher on the station's faster-than-light communication project, work that could revolutionize how species across the galaxy stayed in contact. Her face showed the same quiet sadness that Tony had been feeling since receiving his orders. "I got the recall notice," she said, joining him at the window. 3 years of work and we are just walking away from it." Tony nodded without taking his eyes off the stars. "The hardest part is not being able to explain why. Dr. Kent has been asking me all week what is wrong. He thinks I am angry about something." Dr. Kent was a Valnari researcher who had worked closely with Amy for 2 years. The Valnari were energy beings who existed in specialized containment fields, but Kent had learned to communicate with humans better than most of his species. He and Amy had developed what appeared to be a genuine friendship based on shared scientific curiosity. Amy sighed and pressed her hand against the cool glass of the viewing window. "I wanted to tell him the truth. He deserves to know why we are leaving." But the orders were clear. No explanations until the formal withdrawal. The recall process had been carefully planned by Earth's leadership. Every human serving in Council space had received similar orders. They were to complete their current assignments, submit resignation letters citing personal reasons, and return to human territory. No one was to discuss the real reasons for leaving until Ambassador Parker made the formal announcement to the Council. Lieutenant Colonel Steve Murphy commanded the human peacekeeping forces on Thurok Prime, the heavily industrialized homeworld of the massive gray-skinned species. His unit had been working alongside Thurok security forces for 2 years, helping to maintain order in the mining colonies that provided rare metals to the entire Council. Steve had developed a deep respect for the Thurok, finding them to be honest and straightforward in ways that reminded him of the best human soldiers. Colonel Drek, his Thurok counterpart, visited Steve's office on the day before the human withdrawal. Drek was nearly 3 meters tall and built like a living mountain, but he moved with surprising gentleness as he sat down across from Steve's desk. His voice rumbled like distant thunder when he spoke. "My friend Steve, the other commanders are worried about your departure. The mining colonies have been more peaceful since your people arrived. Without human peacekeepers, we fear the old troubles will return." Steve felt the weight of letting down an ally who had become a friend. "I wish I could stay, Drek. But my orders are clear. All human military personnel are being reassigned." Drek's small eyes studied Steve's face carefully. "This is not about military rotation. Something has changed. You humans are leaving everywhere, not just here. My cousin works on the energy stations in Zephyrian space. He says humans there are also departing." Steve maintained the cover story he had been given, but it felt wrong to lie to someone who had fought beside him. Sometimes governments make decisions that individual soldiers do not fully understand. "I can only follow my orders." The conversation ended with an awkward goodbye between 2 warriors who had shared dangers and victories. Steve packed his personal, belongings, and prepared to leave a world where he had felt useful and respected. He wondered if the Thurok would understand the truth when it was finally revealed, or if they would feel betrayed by humanity's silent departure. Dr. Beth Clark managed supply coordination for the entire council network from her office on the neutral station at Crossroads. The station existed at the intersection of major shipping lanes, serving as a hub where goods from dozens of worlds were sorted and distributed throughout council space. Beth had transformed the chaotic logistics system she inherited into a model of efficiency that other species studied and admired. Her replacement was a well-meaning Thurok administrator named Gorth, who had been trying to learn Beth's methods for the past month. Beth watched him struggle with the complex tracking systems she had developed, knowing that her departure would create problems that might take years to solve. "The key is understanding the timing," she explained for the 5th time that week. "The Zephyrian energy shipments have to arrive at the mining worlds before the Thurok shifts begin. If the timing is wrong, entire colonies can lose power." Gorth nodded his massive head and took careful notes with a stylus that looked tiny in his huge hands. "But how do you predict when the Zephyrian ships will be delayed by solar storms? Their energy beings are affected by cosmic radiation in ways that are difficult to calculate." Beth pulled up her prediction models on the main display screen. "I developed these algorithms by studying 3 years of shipping data and weather patterns. The computer can now predict delays with about 70% accuracy." What she did not tell Gorth was that the algorithms relied on intuitive adjustments that she made based on subtle patterns she had learned to recognize. The mathematical models were only part of the solution. The rest came from a human ability to see connections and make logical leaps that other species seemed to struggle with. Captain Jake Morrison oversaw communication security for the Council's diplomatic network from his base on Luna Station. His team had developed encryption protocols that kept sensitive negotiations private and prevented hostile forces from intercepting military communications. The work required constant updates and improvements as new threats emerged across the galaxy. His alien counterparts had tried to learn his methods, but they struggled with the creative thinking that effective security required. Jake had to constantly anticipate new types of attacks and develop countermeasures for threats that did not yet exist. It was work that demanded the kind of flexible problem-solving that humans seem to excel at. The security briefing with his replacement was frustrating for both of them. Commander Vex was a highly intelligent Zephyrian whose crystalline matrix could process information at incredible speeds, but he approached every problem with rigid logical steps that left little room for creative solutions. "The encryption keys must be changed according to this schedule," Jake explained, pointing to the rotation calendar on his wall. "But if you detect any unusual activity, you should change them immediately regardless of the schedule." Vex's blue light flickered with confusion. "How do I determine what constitutes unusual activity? The parameters you have listed are quite general." Jake realized that what seemed obvious to him was actually based on years of experience and intuitive pattern recognition. "You have to develop a feel for what normal looks like. Then you will notice when something is different." The conversation continued for hours, but Jake could see that Vex was struggling to understand concepts that were more art than science. When Jake left Luna Station the next day, he knew that the communication networks would become vulnerable to attacks that his replacement might not anticipate. Across Council space, similar scenes played out as humans completed their final duties and prepared to leave. Scientists finished their research projects and handed over incomplete work to alien colleagues who might never understand the full implications. Military advisors briefed their replacements on tactics and strategies that relied on human insights into psychology and behavior. Engineers explained maintenance procedures for systems they had designed, but which other species would struggle to repair. The withdrawal was polite and professional, but it left gaps throughout the Council's operations that would only become apparent after the humans were gone. Each departing human took with them knowledge, skills, and perspectives that had become integral to how the galactic community functioned. They were not abandoning their posts in anger or spite. They were simply going home, taking their capabilities with them, and leaving the Council to discover how much they had relied on human contributions. The quiet revolution had begun, and its effects would ripple through galactic civilization in ways that no one yet understood. 6 months after the human withdrawal began, the first major crisis struck the Zephyrian energy grid. The crystalline beings had built their entire civilization around the controlled manipulation of pure energy, creating power networks that supplied electricity to 17 different worlds. The system was a marvel of engineering that had operated flawlessly for decades, but it relied on safety protocols designed by Dr. Lisa Chen before her quiet departure. Engineer Flux 7739 floated in his containment field above the main control center on Zephyria Prime, watching warning lights flash across dozens of monitoring stations. The energy cascade that had started 3 hours ago in the outer rim generators was spreading through the network faster than anyone had anticipated. Standard containment procedures were failing, and the backup systems that should have isolated the problem were not responding. "Where is Dr. Chen?" Flux 7739 asked his assistant, a younger Zephyrian named Bright 2441. Her expertise with cascade failures could resolve this situation quickly. Bright 2441's energy pattern flickered with uncertainty. Dr. Chen submitted her resignation 4 months ago. She returned to human space for personal reasons. Her replacement, Engineer Korth from the Thurok Engineering Corps, has been attempting to understand her safety systems. Flux 7739 pulsed with frustration. The safety protocols that Dr. Chen had installed were elegant solutions that prevented energy cascades from spreading between grid sections. But the documentation she had left behind assumed a level of understanding about energy manipulation that most non-human engineers simply did not possess. Her methods worked, but no one else fully understood why they worked. The cascade reached the industrial sector of Zephyria Prime an hour later. 17 manufacturing plants lost power simultaneously, shutting down production lines that supplied components to dozens of other worlds. The automated systems that should have rerouted power from backup generators had been modified by Dr. Chen to prevent exactly this type of failure. But her modifications were based on principles that the current engineering team could not duplicate. Engineer Korth arrived at the control center with several data pads containing his analysis of Dr. Chen's work. The massive Thurok moved carefully between the delicate Zephyrian equipment, his gray skin glistening with perspiration from the stress of the situation. He had been studying Dr. Chen's designs for months, but they relied on intuitive leaps and creative solutions that his methodical thinking could not replicate. "I have identified the source of the cascade," Korth announced in his rumbling voice. "But Dr. Chen's containment protocols require manual adjustments that must be timed precisely with the energy fluctuations. The mathematical models she used appear to be incomplete." Flux 7739 studied the readings on his instruments. "Incomplete how? Her systems have prevented every cascade event for the past 3 years. Korth consulted his datapads again. The mathematical formulas she documented only account for about 60% of the variables involved in energy cascade prevention. The remaining variables appear to be calculated using methods she did not record in any of her files. The realization hit Flux 7739 like a surge of uncontrolled electricity. Dr. Chen had not documented her complete methods because they relied on human intuition and pattern recognition that could not be easily explained to other species. She made thousands of tiny adjustments based on her understanding of how energy behaved in different situations, adjustments that seemed obvious to her but were invisible to engineers who thought in more rigid patterns. The cascade continued to spread through the energy grid, while the engineering team struggled to implement solutions they did not fully understand. By the end of the day, 6 worlds had lost primary power and were running on emergency generators that could only function for a few more days. The Zephyrian civilization faced its first major infrastructure crisis in over a century, and the person who could solve it was halfway across the galaxy in human space. On the agricultural world of Verdant, the Biological Research Station was dealing with a different type of emergency. Dr. Elena Rodriguez had been the lead xenobiologist studying 3 different plague organisms that threatened to spread through Council space. Her research had identified the genetic weaknesses of these diseases and developed containment protocols that prevented them from jumping between species. Dr. Whisper of Leaves was a Sylvan researcher whose plant-based biology gave her unique insights into organic systems, but she had relied heavily on Elena's work to understand how diseases affected animal-based life forms. When the first outbreak occurred in the Thurok mining colonies, Whisper of Leaves found herself trying to implement treatment protocols that she could not fully comprehend. The antiviral compounds that Dr. Rodriguez developed are effective, Whisper of Leaves explained to the emergency medical team. But the dosage calculations require understanding how the disease interacts with different types of metabolism. Her notes reference biological principles that are not well documented in our databases. The medical crisis spread when a second outbreak occurred among the insect-like Krex population on their homeworld. The disease had mutated slightly, as Elena had predicted it would, but her contingency plans for dealing with mutations relied on rapid analysis techniques that other researchers could not duplicate. Elena had possessed an intuitive understanding of how biological systems adapted and evolved that allowed her to stay ahead of changing threats. Dr. Buzz Click 7 led the Krex medical response team, but his compound eyes could not see the subtle patterns that Elena had used to predict disease mutations. Dr. Rodriguez left detailed protocols for 16 different mutation scenarios, he reported to the Council health authorities, but the current outbreak does not match any of the scenarios she documented. We need to develop new treatments, but her research methods are too complex for our team to replicate quickly. The third outbreak hit the Vale Nari energy research stations 2 weeks later. This version of the disease had adapted to affect energy-based life forms, something that Elena had warned might happen in her final reports. But her warnings had included prevention strategies that required biological knowledge that the energy beings simply did not possess. The Council's military forces faced their own crisis when the Outer Rim rebellions flared up again. The tactical strategies that had kept these conflicts contained for years had been developed by human military advisors who understood how to minimize casualties while achieving strategic objectives. Without human input, Council forces found themselves falling back on older, more brutal methods that escalated conflicts instead of resolving them. General Marcus Stone had been the chief tactical advisor for Council peacekeeping operations before his recall to human space. His replacement, War Leader Thak from the aggressive Krex species, approached every conflict with overwhelming force rather than the subtle strategies that Marcus had favored. The first major engagement under Thak's leadership resulted in heavy casualties on both sides and turned a local rebellion into a system-wide uprising. The rebels had expected the careful, measured response they had learned to anticipate from human-advised Council forces. Instead, they faced a brutal assault that violated several interspecies agreements and sparked outrage among neutral populations. War Leader Thak's methods are effective at eliminating immediate threats, reported Admiral Flux Prime to the Council Military Committee, but they create long-term problems that may prove more difficult to resolve than the original conflicts. The pattern repeated across multiple crisis points throughout Council space. Human administrators had been quietly managing complex systems that other species could not easily understand or replicate. Human researchers had been solving problems using methods that relied on intuitive leaps and creative thinking that their alien colleagues found difficult to duplicate. Human military advisors had been developing strategies that balanced multiple objectives in ways that required understanding psychology and behavior on levels that other species struggled to achieve. The Council leadership began to realize that Humanity's contributions had been far more extensive and fundamental than anyone had understood. Humans had not simply been participants in galactic civilization, they had been the invisible foundation that held many crucial systems together. Emergency. Sessions were called to address the growing crisis, but the solutions required expertise that was no longer available. The humans were gone, taking with them knowledge and capabilities that had become integral to how the Council functioned. Every day brought new problems that highlighted just how much the galactic community had relied on human innovation and adaptability. The Archon Prime stood before the Council Assembly and tried to maintain an air of calm authority, but his skin showed the deep purple coloration that indicated stress and worry. "We are facing temporary difficulties due to personnel transitions," he announced. "Our engineering and scientific teams are working to resolve these issues and restore normal operations." But privately, the Council leadership knew that they were dealing with something much more serious than temporary difficulties. They were discovering that their carefully managed galactic civilization had become dependent on the very species they had been trying to control. The humans had walked away, quietly and now. The council chambers felt different when Ambassador Lisa Parker returned for the final time. The great hall that had once buzzed with confident energy now carried an undertone of desperation that even the translation systems could not hide. 8 months had passed since humanity began its quiet withdrawal, and the effects were visible everywhere. Emergency lighting flickered in sections where the power grid remained unstable. Several delegate platforms sat empty as species dealt with crises in their home systems. The air itself seemed heavier with worry and uncertainty. Lisa walked to the central speaking platform with the same calm dignity she had shown during her previous visit. Behind her, Jake Morrison and Elena Rodriguez took their positions as witnesses to this final act of humanity's departure from galactic civilization. The alien delegates watched with expressions that ranged from desperate hope to barely contained panic. The Archon Prime stood to address the assembly, but his 4 arms trembled slightly, and his skin showed the mottled gray coloration that indicated exhaustion and stress. "Ambassador Parker, we welcome your return to the Council. Recent months have brought challenges that require the wisdom and cooperation of all member species. Perhaps we can discuss how humanity might assist in resolving these temporary difficulties." Lisa looked around the chamber at faces that had become familiar over the years. Some of these beings had been colleagues and even friends. She could see the toll that the past months had taken on them. The proud Zephyrians flickered with unstable energy patterns. The mighty Thurok seemed smaller somehow, burdened by problems they could not solve with strength alone. Even the ethereal Veilnari moved with less grace than she remembered. "Honored delegates," Lisa began, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "I have not returned to negotiate or to offer assistance. I have come to formally complete humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Council and all associated agreements." A ripple of distress went through the assembly. Several delegates started to speak at once, but the Archon Prime raised his arms for silence. His skin had shifted to deep red, the color of fear and anger mixed together. "Ambassador Parker, surely, you can see that this is not the time for hasty decisions. The Council faces unprecedented challenges that affect all member species. The energy grid failures in Zephyrian space have disrupted manufacturing throughout 17 systems. The biological containment breaches threaten to spread disease across multiple worlds. The military situation in the Outer Rim grows worse each day." Lisa nodded with what appeared to be sympathy. "I am aware of these difficulties. They are unfortunate, but not unexpected." The Thurok delegate War Chief Grom stood up on his massive platform, his gray skin glistening with perspiration. "The mining colonies cannot maintain production without the logistical systems that human administrators developed. Our people work hard, but we do not understand the complex scheduling that kept supplies flowing smoothly. Engineer Flux 7739 floated higher in his containment field, his blue energy crackling with agitation. The power grid modifications that Dr. Chen created are failing throughout our territory. We have her documentation, but we cannot replicate her intuitive understanding of energy cascade prevention. Dr. Whisper of Leaves swayed forward on her root system, her voice carrying the rustling sound of wind through forest. The biological research that Dr. Rodriguez left behind assumes knowledge of disease adaptation that our scientists struggle to comprehend. We can follow her procedures, but we cannot anticipate new mutations the way she could. Lisa listened to each complaint with patient attention, but her expression remained unchanged. These difficulties illustrate exactly why humanity has chosen to withdraw from the Council system. The Archon Prime's skin cycled through several colors rapidly. We do not understand. How do current problems justify abandoning the alliance that has brought peace and prosperity to the galaxy for millennia? Lisa activated a small holographic projector that displayed images from the ancient archives that Elena's team had discovered. Because this alliance was never built on the principles of equality and cooperation that you claimed, the archaeological evidence we uncovered shows that the Council was designed as a management system to control emerging species and prevent them from becoming truly independent. She gestured to the images showing the detailed files about humanity's role as a catalyst species. Every challenge we faced, every crisis we overcame, every achievement we accomplished was orchestrated as part of an ongoing experiment. We were not partners in this alliance. We were test subjects being studied and manipulated. The chamber erupted in protests and denials, but Lisa continued speaking over the noise. The current difficulties you face are not temporary problems that cooperation can solve. They are the natural result of a system that was designed to create dependence rather than foster genuine partnership. War Leader Thak from the aggressive Krex species buzzed angrily from his platform. Even if these accusations were true, the current reality is that we need human expertise to maintain galactic stability. Surely practical considerations outweigh historical grievances. Lisa turned to face him directly. The current reality is that you built a civilization that could not function without the very species you were trying to control. You studied our psychology, our problem-solving methods, and our adaptability so thoroughly that you integrated them into every aspect of Council operations without realizing it. She looked around the chamber at the assembled delegates. Human administrators did not simply follow procedures. They created new solutions to problems that your existing systems could not handle. Human researchers did not just gather data. They made intuitive leaps that led to breakthroughs your more methodical approaches could not achieve. Human military advisors did not merely follow tactical doctrine. They developed strategies that balanced multiple objectives in ways that required understanding behavior and psychology on levels that your species find difficult to reach. The Vailnari delegate Shimmer of Thoughts spoke in whispers that the translation system amplified. We did not realize how dependent we had become on human contributions, but surely this mutual dependence proves the value of cooperation between our species. Lisa shook her head slowly. It proves the opposite. True cooperation requires equality and honesty. What you built was a system that used our capabilities while denying us the truth about our situation. You treated us as valuable resources to be managed rather than as partners to be respected. The Archon Prime made one final attempt at negotiation. Ambassador Parker, we acknowledge that mistakes were made in the past. Perhaps we can discuss new arrangements that address your concerns while maintaining the benefits of our alliance. Lisa picked up her formal documents from the speaking platform. The time for new arrangements has passed. Humanity has chosen to pursue its own path among the stars. We will build our own civilization based on principles of honesty, independence, and genuine cooperation with any species that approaches us as equals. She looked around the chamber one last time. We do not seek revenge for the deception we discovered. We bear no ill will toward any species represented here. Many of you may have been unaware of the management protocols that guided Council policy. Some of you may even be subjects of similar manipulation. Lisa began walking toward the exit, her footsteps echoing in the suddenly quiet chamber. But we have learned that there are worse things than facing the dangers of independence. Living as managed subjects in someone else's experiment is one of them. As the three humans approached the great doors of the council chamber, the Archon, Prime called out one last desperate plea. What are we supposed to do without human expertise? How are we supposed to solve these crises? Lisa paused at the threshold and looked back at the assembly of alien delegates. Her voice carried clearly through the vast space, but there was no anger in it, only a quiet sadness. You will have to learn to solve them yourselves, the same way humanity will have to learn to build our own future without the support we thought we had found in this alliance. The great doors closed behind the human delegation with a soft hiss of equalizing air pressure. Inside the chamber, 47 alien species sat in stunned silence as they contemplated a future without the human element they had taken for granted. The carefully constructed civilization that had managed galactic affairs for millennia would have to find new ways to function, new solutions to old problems, and new relationships based on equality rather than manipulation. In human space, ships were already exploring new star systems and making contact with species that had never been part of the Council's sphere of influence. Humanity was building something different, something honest, something that would stand or fall based on their own choices rather than someone else's experiment. The humans had walked away quietly, and the galaxy would never be the same.